Welcome to another episode of Blixx Horses. I'm Steve Poulos, co-hosting with Gabriela Rodriguez. Gabriela, nice to see you again today.
Nice to see you again, too.
You know, the last time we talked about your show, we talked about a bunch of things that were, more involved than just a 10-second answer. And I guess basically, if we talked about the evolution and everything, but let's down to the nuts and bolts. What is a horse?
Well, can I say a couple of things first before we go?
Wait a minute. Now, you gave me the card at the beginning of the show.
No, I know. Well, that is going to be
right.
the beginning.
Okay.
What is a horse? But can I tell you what I went through this morning in order to make sure that I got here, since it's a reality show? And
Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, just to let people know out there that today we had a little bit of inclement weather and ice and rain and snow, depending on where you live. So it wasn't just a normal day for you, but
right.
What'd you go through?
Well, it wasn't actually not too bad. Remember, we talked about organization is key, but organization is key if you have kids too, right? Get them off to school every day, do things with them on the weekends. So this is no different. It's just that you happen to have horses, in addition to the dogs and the kids and everything else. So the footing wasn't too bad. I was afraid it was going to be really icy, because what we got, I don't know what you got up here, but in Kennebunk we got a little bit of sleet, very little snow, maybe just a quarter of an inch, but it was enough to just cover the surfaces. And so the surfaces where the snow had been removed that were close to the ground, where most of the that were flat from the shoveling, can be dangerous for the horses. So I went and checked it out first. Everything was pretty good, and you know, it always takes a little bit of work, but one thing that I found is when you have the snow banks, after you shovel, especially after as much snow as we've had, the easiest thing to do with horses to make sure they get traction that they need is to get the snow from the sides and just push it down into the paths that you have. And so they're no longer icy. They have some place to step on.
Oh, I see, yeah.
So that was pretty easy. It was a nice morning, so I was able to let them out of their stalls first thing in the morning around 5 o'clock, 5:30, gave them some hay. And then, of course, what we talked about the last time, cleanup. And people, it's important for them to understand that cleanup is huge. When you have horses, you're cleaning all the time.
Now, you told me, correct me if I'm wrong, was it every hour?
Well, once an hour they go to the bathroom. Yeah, they go, how do you say it appropriately? Do we say
no,
they
that's
poop?
Close enough. Number one, number two?
Number one, okay, number two. Number one is actually, if anybody's interested, about every 3 hours, 3 to 4 hours. But number two is every hour. So you can imagine how much manure there is within a 24-hour period.
And I would imagine, since you know that,
Yep.
how much they go, then you probably could gauge if they're not feeling well.
Yes.
Because that must change, correct?
There's no manure, you're in big trouble.
Okay.
So it's always, it's like you said, a two-edged sword. When you will open up the stalls and they've been in there since 11 o'clock the night before, and you find all this manure. The nice thing about the wintertime when the temperatures do get cold is that the manure freezes, so it's really easy to pick up. So that's to everything that you do with horses and with kids too, just in life in general. Isn't there always two parts? There's the good and maybe the not so good, and you have to figure out what to do and make decisions based on that. So you know, we gave them their hay. I put them out in the ring where the sun comes in, so we know our property really well, and we know where they're going to be happy most of the time during the course of the day, and where the sun's going to shine, because this is winter, so we want to keep them as warm as we can and comfortable. Took the hay outside, some warm water in buckets, and today's a big special day. Every Monday is delivery day, and we have Andy's Agway in Dayton that delivers for us, and Paul from Andy's is just amazing. If I wasn't there, he'd know what to do. He knows what I need, and I can count on that service. And today they're going to be bringing their round bales, so they don't have a big round bale anymore. We still have the square bales, but they like that round bale. It's very convenient for them, and it's nice for them to have. So today, since Paul was coming, we had to make sure that everything was clear so he could get his truck in and truck out. A lot of times he's just amazing. In a blink of an eye, he's there and gone. And a lot of times he does it himself. We try to make sure someone's home to help him, because that's a lot of work that he does.
Well, what does he normally drop off for? I mean, those big round bales are a good size.
They're huge, yeah.
How many of them does he leave there?
Well, just one.
One.
Once a week. he drops one off, but he has to maneuver the truck, especially with the ice and the snow and the footing and all that, maneuver it, and we have to figure out a plan of how to get that round bale from the truck, roll it in to the round bale holder. So, you know, everything that you do with the horses is kind of on a big scale.
Yeah.
And that's why gloves come in handy, because you're always have twine in your hands or you're picking something up. And that's the other thing with horses, you're always picking up. And so if you're somebody that doesn't really want to pick up, or somebody that doesn't want to clean up, or the idea of having that much manure and having to wheel it around doesn't attract you, then maybe it's not a good thing to have a horse. Maybe stick with a dog.
Now, probably not the greatest question, but it is something I kind of was curious about. Is it put off like an odor like maybe dog manure would?
Not at all.
Is it more like a cow?
No, not even that. It's just a little bit of grain in our case. It's a little bit of very little grain, and hay. This hay that we have
so it's
here.
just kind of reconstituted, but
That's
it's not.
that's it.
Yeah.
No,
okay.
and it doesn't smell. You know, for lack of a better word, it doesn't.
It's not like decayed meat and all
No,
that kind
well,
of stuff.
exactly. Yeah. So there's a huge difference
Okay.
in the components of the manure,
Okay.
and so because there isn't, there's nothing that you have to worry about with you know, as far as the smell. Now, if you don't clean every day, you'll definitely find a smell. What does have the smell, and this is
Urine.
important, is urine.
Yeah.
The breakdown is ammonia.
But that's an important thing to know too, because you know it is a lot of work to actually physically take care of it.
Yeah.
And make sure that it all gets out. But it's not that repulsive odor that you might have
No.
with like chicken manure or
No,
something
but you know
like
what? The urine is. It's
Right.
really disgusting. And that's important because, like I said about the breakdown of urine, and it's horribly harmful on the respiratory systems of people and of the horses too. So if you ever walk into a barn and that's the predominant smell, there's probably something going on there that needs to be remedied or changed.
Much like with cats. If
Yeah.
you don't take care of the litter box, you know the people that do and don't.
Right.
5 seconds, you know.
Right, right. And the other thing I have to say, though, and say you have big barns and there's, what, 20 horses in these boarding facilities, maybe even more. If you do walk in and you smell manure or urine, you also have to remember if those horses have been inside since 6, 7 o'clock at night. Most
yeah.
in boarding facilities, you care for the horses differently. They have to find a way that works for all of them. So typically in the wintertime, the horses are in after it gets dark. If they go inside, hopefully they do, and they have good stalls, nice stalls. But if they're in there at 6 o'clock, and then you don't see them until 6 o'clock the next morning, you can imagine how much manure and urine and everything is going to be in there. So you might smell it, but it should be gone. That's
Right, it's not like a lingering thing.
Yeah.
Once
Well, no,
it's
you should see people in there removing
Cleaning, yeah.
everything and cleaning.
What do they do though? I mean, like most animals, for instance, won't relieve themselves where they eat or they certain part.
Yeah.
Do they just go wherever?
No, that's the same thing.
Okay.
If they're given the opportunity, and this is the other thing, horses will always do or not do what we give them and what we put in front of them and give them opportunities to do. So if a horse is put into a tiny little stall, and I've seen really small stalls at some of these boarding facilities where they put large horses and the horses can't lay down, they can hardly turn around, and so where are they going to go to the bathroom, and where are they go? They don't have any choices. Now if you give a horse a big enough stall, a 12 by 12 stall for your average horse is a good sized stall, and that's what people should plan on having even for a smaller horse because they can move around a little bit. And so they'll go to the bathroom in one area and eat somewhere else.
Okay.
Yeah, they're the same, and,
Yeah.
and it's really upsetting to me sometimes because people just in the general public that don't know horses too well, if they see horses and they go to a barn, say, and they see a bunch of manure, the first thing they think is the horses are such dirty animals.
Yeah.
Right,
They're
and
stepping all in it.
well, they try to avoid it.
Right,
Even
right.
in the trailer, they don't like to step in it.
Well, like you
which is-
said, it's what you give them.
It's what you give them.
You give them a 6 by 8 stall or
Yeah.
something. I mean, you know, they can't.
Yeah, and it's really not fair to them, and you have to think of it in terms of yourself, okay? So would you like to have a bedroom the size of a bathroom, or would you like to have a
Right.
bedroom? I mean, that's the only analogy I could come up with, but
And I'll be
what's
honest,
better?
that's the reason why Steve's got the big office in here, because wanted to make sure he had plenty of
Yeah, space. So anyway, I wanted to also just mention that the reason that you and I are still co-hosting these shows and I don't have people on yet is because we're trying to get into that mode and trying to figure out the topics, but also I'm trying to give people just little pieces of information
Basic.
and topics, just generalizations, and then we'll have people in to speak about those things in a more detailed manner. So that's what this show's about.
And what are we going to talk about next?
Well, I want to announce, just for anybody that's listening and hears about this today or tomorrow, if anybody else wants to talk about it, is the freezing cold weather we're getting this week. It's going to be very cold. Tomorrow it's supposed to be below 0 in the morning. And it's supposed to be cold for the rest of the week. And really, when the weatherman says frigid, they mean really cold. So you have to take care of the animals, especially if they're outside. The horses are no different. They should have shelter. They should be out of the wind. And you have to make sure that their ears don't get frostbitten. They can get hypothermia too. So that's a really important thing for people to be thinking about and making a plan about what they're going to do this week. If they've already been blanketing their horses, different people do different things. There is a certain way that is healthier for the horse to do things. But if, for example, a horse has already had blankets on them, considering the weather really hasn't been, I mean, it's been cold here and there. Well, you've got to put more, so don't forget that you need to do that. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And if the horses haven't been blanketed very much, like mine really haven't, maybe just a couple, 3 days because of the wind, I'm going to put heavier blankets on them, but they're going to stay a little bit warmer because they're not accustomed to that.
Right. And does their fur, does that adjust to what they're, like, in other words, yours haven't had it on, so they tend to maybe have a little bit more of a coat or whatever you call it?
They have more of a coat, and the coat is healthier because it's not pushed down.
Okay.
And it's been allowed to breathe. So all that's
Which makes it
good.
warmer because the air in between.
Explained that before. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And so January is the only, January, maybe a little bit of February up here, except for maybe up north. And winds you also always have to be careful with, but January and part of February are the coldest months, and that's where you have to make sure that your horses are properly insulated. And you also have to remember to take those blankets off and brush them because the blankets get itchy. You can't leave them on 24/7 for a week. That's not good for them to do either. They get covered with manure, they slip, they rub, and you know, you can equate that to how would you feel having, you know, 24/7
with body sores and everything else.
Exactly. Yeah. So you have to remember that too. And then I don't know if we need to introduce Susie again, our free horse, and just mention again that it's nice that she wasn't a real horse because unfortunately sometimes horses are put out and they're not wanted, and somebody's trying to sell them, and they're not trying to are not able to find a home. They put a price on them, nobody wants to pay. They end up being free, and it's not a bad thing to be free, but we have to remember that a lot of horses don't end up in good care. They end up in neglect or abuse or in worse situations. And with that said, I also want to say that there are a lot of horses that do end up in good homes. So, and they're the lucky ones, but it's important if you're going to not keep your horse and you really do care about the welfare of your horse to keep in touch.
And I will say that the thing I like about everybody that I've talked to run these rescues and stuff is that they keep track of them. And with some of them, I understand there's like a contract that if you were to go in and get that horse and then you decided after a year or whatever, I can't keep him, under the contract, you can't just get rid of that horse.
Yeah.
You have to go back through the agency,
that's good.
which
it's very responsible. It takes a lot of work.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, but it's in the best interest of the horse, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
And also of the people that take them, because who knows what the reason is they had to get rid of them. Maybe there's an illness or something. Maybe it isn't that they don't want them, but they know they can't. And they know that they have a place they can go where that horse will
right.
take care. Hopefully my kids feel that way about
Well,
me.
yeah, you know, and I was going to say, too, that things do happen, and there's extenuating circumstances all the time that could happen to any of us. But what we want to try to remember if we don't have a horse yet is to think about that.
Right.
And like I said, if they're part of the family, then they may not have to go anywhere else because other people will be helping to take care of them, too. That's a really important point, and the values that you can teach your children by having these large animals, the small ones too, taking the dog for a walk, feeding the dog, caring for a dog. This is a little bit more work, but it's just as gratifying, if not more so. And that way you don't have to worry about trying to find another place where your horse can go. I mean, you know, if you think about it realistically, most of us, well, we wouldn't trade our kids in, would we? I mean, if something happened that was extenuating, you know, maybe the child might go with an aunt or somebody that could help take care of them for a while, but they would still be your children. You wouldn't get rid of them. Yeah, and so, I mean, to me, I think the horse is probably, you do whatever it is that you have to do in order to maintain that responsibility with your horse. It's big, but if you're the one that got the horse, then that's something that you need to really think about. And you really need to think about letting go of your horse and knowing that you really don't know, unless you keep track, where that horse is going to end up. And it could end up in a slaughter truck, it could end up in misery, or it could end up in a good home. So, but that's the reality, and it's important to think about that.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
But actually, it's pretty simple.
Yeah.
Just, you basically, you just have to think of, like you mentioned before, how you would want to be treated. That's all you have to think about.
Yeah, yeah,
you know?
Yeah. It is. I also wanted to just mention real quickly that I do ride. I don't want people to get the impression that I don't ride and that I don't think riding is good or the sports aren't good. I think it's all fine. But I think you have to pick and choose and decide what you're going to do and do it responsibly. And if you ride, I mean, we were making fun a little bit the other day about putting, I said 10% of the horse's weight should be on the horse. And I was sort of serious there, but I was, you know, you could put a little bit more, maybe say 15%, but what's important is that if you do ride, you're not hurting the horse when you're riding, so you find other alternatives, other ways of doing things if you feel that you're causing your horse any discomfort. I think that would be important.
That's kind of interesting. I mean, you said, like, for instance, Lexi was about 1,000 pounds.
Yeah.
And I'm like 210, so I shouldn't ride Lexi?
I wouldn't. If I were you, I wouldn't let you. I wouldn't either.
I know that. You don't even want me near her, but that's beside the point. But no, I never. What happened in John Wayne's case?
Well,
that poor.
Yeah, John Wayne was actually known. I mean, they didn't show it. They were able to do it well on television, but he rode really small horses.
Yes, I know, because and a lot of that was to give him the appearance of being larger.
Exactly. Plus,
like,
if he would fall off, he didn't have far to go. And a lot of times people choose small horses because they're afraid. I mean, it's really interesting. They go into it and they really, really want to ride, but they're really afraid of falling off. And if you're going to ride and you're going to do that, then you're probably going to fall off. So you should just get it over with. You know, I mean, not really, but I mean, it's part of what you're asking for.
Well, it's and I want to tie it up, but it's like dogs. A lot of times people will say, and I know people like this, they don't like big dogs. Oh my God, if I get bit by a big dog. Yeah. But they get a small dog, and small dogs are known to bite more often than big dogs. Little bites, but it's like, you know, some of the thought process really isn't.
It doesn't seem to work in reality.
Any sense. Yeah.
No, it doesn't. But also, as far as aesthetics go, if you see a horse with two different riders and one is a little smaller than the other and in proportion it looks more aesthetic, it just looks nicer, and everybody wants to look nice on a horse, or we wouldn't wear all these things to make ourselves look good, you know, on horses.
And also, especially with going back to what we talked about in other shows and also earlier before we started the show, people that are taking a rescue horse. There's plenty of horses out there that probably should not be ridden, but they're still adoptable.
Yes.
And so people can think of it that way, that 10%, 15% rule is if you have a horse, obviously, that can be ridden and is healthy enough for that. But otherwise, they shouldn't necessarily not want to adopt an animal, because there are plenty of people that maybe don't want to ride them anyway.
Right. Well, it's just always horses. I was talking to somebody before the show, and I said, you know, what do you think of when you think of a horse? And he said, well, that's a beast of burden. And I said, oh, you know, I don't hear people say that too often. Usually say, oh, the horse is beautiful. He said, yeah. But I said, you know, you're right. They do see them as beasts of burden, and they still are to some degree in some categories. But as far as the riding thing goes, and I just lost my train of thought. I can't remember what I was what was saying about the riding. Oh, they're synonymous with riding. If you think of horses, and even just your regular population of people will think horses, oh, ride. And a lot of times they won't develop relationships with a horse, or like you said, even think about bringing one into the family because they don't ride, and they think that that would be some kind of a disservice because the horses needs to be ridden. And like I told you too, 90% of our programs that we have center around the groundwork that you do with horses, and all that cleanup that I did today, that I do every single day, is great for, you know, my arms, and it's good exercise. And I have to be very honest, it really keeps you healthy. It's a very healthy lifestyle. So I think there are more horses out there that could be adopted, whether it's a little Mustang or any number of horses out there that need homes and brought into a family, and maybe somebody in that family maybe wants to ride, but when you go into it, you should think about keeping that horse as a part of the family. Also, the horse that you keep is the safest horse you have, because for people that keep selling their horse, getting another horse, this one didn't work out, they give that horse 30 days. I mean, it's really kind of unrealistic, shall we say, to give an animal or a dog or anything 30 days to work out, or else, and out it goes. Or, you know, in some cases they give the animal 2 to 3 years and it doesn't work, but there's a lot of things that they can do to change. And it's the same thing with kids. I mean, if our kids aren't working out the way we want them to work out, where are we going to send them? No, you have to keep working with them.
Right, and if you get a horse with the intention, like a lot of new people, in my case would be, I probably fitted that category, if I decided I was going to have a horse. I've never had one before, I've never really ridden or anything, but I decide, well, I want to ride a horse. And I get the horse, and it turns out that, gee, this horse, maybe it has a health problem nobody knew about, or some reason that it's not working out. Well, maybe it's also possible for me to reassess the reason why I got the horse, and look at the other, like you said, the benefits of it. Just like you do with a dog.
Right.
Dog.
A
Where
dog.
am I from? with Minnesota or someplace?
That's right. It's a lot easier to say, oh, you know, somebody else could give it a better home. Or, I mean, it's easy for us as human beings to try to shuffle off that responsibility on somebody else, or deeply believe that somebody else can do a better job, because we know it's going to be a lot of work. But that's okay. A lot of work can be very gratifying in the end. And that brings me to a point that you made a couple shows ago. You asked if people should do their research before they get a horse. And they absolutely should. But they have to be very careful.
Like you said, they have to go to reputable sites, and not Wikipedia necessarily, or
Wikipedia is a good site.
It is, but you never know who's uploading the information.
That's true, too.
So it's got to be able to be referenced. But if you go to, like you said, and I did. I tried that out, by the way.
Yeah, oh, good.
I did go on and see that there are a lot of really helpful
on every subject,
Even some of these rescue places will have links to other places, which you can assume. Like, for instance, if I went on your website and you had a link to some other place, I can pretty well assume that that's going to be reputable, and that I know you, or at least I know your site is reputable. And it's the same with, there are ways of getting that information.
Oh, sure. And you would probably also go on to that link and make that decision for yourself, right? I mean, everybody has to make their own decisions. Just because I have a website and I have a certain reputation, I am conscientious and I am vigilant, and I would never put anything on my site for any reason other than benefiting a horse and benefiting a human being. But not all sites may be like that. So you have to go in there and make absolutely sure. But part of the reason that I'm really enjoying the show is because I had so many trainers that I had in the very beginning that all agreed, and they were right, that my first horse, Blue, wasn't the right horse for me. But I ended up doing what a lot of people do, and he just needed help, so I got a, quote, rescue horse. From this really bad situation. But his personality and my personality were very similar. He startles, I startle. I startle before he startles sometimes. It was funny, but it wasn't. Well, it was very dangerous, and it took about a good year and a half for me to understand what was going on. But when you startle, if you're riding a horse, the first thing you do is pull back on the reins and hurt their mouth. And if you're say, walking alongside that horse, if you have the courage to even do that, you might get kicked or killed or stepped on or something, because you're fearful or you startle. And you don't understand, as nobody explained to me, that these animals, because they're prey, they may startle at anything. And if the horse has never been out of the barn or out of a certain confined area where most horses are, right, because you usually have to go to a barn to see a horse, they're not in the shopping center, then horses will be more startled just because they don't understand the world.
So I guess, like you say with people, worldly.
Yeah.
This person's worldly because
yeah.
because they've been out there in the public and they've experienced a lot of things, whereas some people haven't.
Right.
But let me ask you, in talking about being startled and the horse being, I was at one of the facilities where they were working with these wild horses, Mona's facility, and they were doing this kind of, it was almost like, not sensitivity training, but this training with the horse, getting him used to, it seemed like being startled.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
So there is ways of, it's not like a lost cause.
No.
In your case, I'm sure that horse eventually became.
But it took more than 30 days. If I had been one of those people that said, well, in 30 days if you don't work out. And the other thing I want to say about that, I mean, don't you think the horse knows that you're trying them out?
Yeah, well, so they're not that stupid. So they say, well,
that.
you know what, if I give
behave
them like a kid with a babysitter, you know.
Right.
I cry long enough, they won't hear me anymore, so they'll let me do what I want.
Yeah, you have to persevere. We're the ones with a bigger brain.
Right.
And, even me went and got the horse. I'm the one that got the horse, so I need to do the best thing by the horse. But I probably should have had a nice little quarter horse that wasn't quite as spirited as my horse Blue, an off-the-track thoroughbred that was very fast, and that was his training, to go as fast as he could. So that's what he thought he was supposed to do with everybody that was on his back, because that's what it was expected of him. And when it came to me, I said, no, I don't want to do that. But how does he know that?
Right.
And so then I'm pulling on the bit and I'm squeezing my legs, and that to him means go faster. And
yeah, so you had
I didn't get killed.
To learn a lot.
I had to
learn
a lot.
It wasn't just the horse.
Yeah, and it was every day. I would go every day. I took my phone and my work to the barn with me, and I would spend hours trying to understand the horses, not in the wintertime, but whenever I could, trying to understand them, being there and just watching them. And then I started reading books and trying to learn about the species and, the prey, the startling effect, all that kind of thing. Just completely made sense. And when they said that horses startle, I understood it completely, because I tend to be that way anyway. I startle so I can understand how they might feel if something came up across them.
Did working with him in decreasing his, not sensitivity, but his...
He calmed down.
Calming down, but did that work in turn for you as well?
He taught me to do that.
Yeah, so it kind of played
worked.
off
Yeah,
each
I'm
other.
glad you said that. Yeah, because of him and my experiences with horses in general, I become a calmer person and more focused. And that's part of the therapy that they give you, aside from the therapeutic riding. A lot of people go and they ride also to be able to focus. When they're riding a horse, I mean, you really got to focus when you're on the ground with them too. You got to focus maybe a little bit more, because when you're on, then you're either going around in a circle, or you're doing something. But when you're just walking around with them, if your mind is racing in 10 different directions, you're not going to be able to give that horse the leadership that the horse needs. So, since this is Happy New Year, right? We got a new year, 2014 in 2 days. So to celebrate, I brought some hats. But what I wanted to, the reason that I did this in part is because a lot of people do this in boarding facilities. We always had parties whenever we were in a boarding facility, and we still have them now, to celebrate the horses' birthdays. And when you were talking about Mona and having somebody was over there trying to desensitize the horse a little bit, there's a lot of ways that you can do it, but I tend to be very conservative, and I do it very slowly, and I do it over time. And I also wait until the horse lets me know that the horse is ready. So say this is a real horse, Susie. The thing that you wouldn't want to do, which goes against a lot of the methods that they do use with certain trainers that I disagree with, is to take something, a strange object like this, it's full of different colors.
Shove it right in their face.
They don't understand. And just put it in. What do you think Susie's going to do? Or if it was Lexi, she might start jumping around and bucking and swirling around, and you've got a majorly very dangerous situation, and you wouldn't imagine how how often that kind of thing happens. So the way I would do it is to have the basket first without anything in it, none of the color, and I would put it down someplace close to something else that she liked. And then slowly but surely she would get used to it, she would smell it, she would realize it wasn't anything that was going to hurt her. A lot of times people think that the horses are dumb because they are frightened, but it's actually a very good instinct that they have, because absolutely it's survival. And I'm glad that you understand that, because a lot of people don't. It's their survival. And so I would put the basket there first, and after she got used to the basket, then I would just introduce one hat, not a whole array of hats, particularly all these colors. I mean, she would know if I was a horse or if I didn't speak the language and I was a different species, I would know what this is. You and I have a word for it, and we understand it's something good, it's positive, it's party time, but you know, Susie and any other horse doesn't know. And it doesn't matter if it's Susie, well, it does matter because she's not real, but if it was Lexi, a little Alpha Arabian mare, Fritz, who's a Hanoverian thoroughbred, or a draft horse. And you should be fair to the horses and make sure that you don't do that sort of thing to them. There are trainers that take tarps, and tarps are very frightening because you don't really know what's underneath them, and they have a funny sound. They're very threatening, and they'll take tarps at some of these exhibitions that they have, and they put the tarp, they have the horse stand still, and you can tell the horse might be trembling a little bit, and you can't see it really moving a whole lot, but they've had him trained to stand there and wait until they take this tarp and touch the horse with a tarp. Now, if you've ever had to stand and had somebody come at you with a tarp, even though you know what it is, it doesn't feel good, and it's a frightening thing. So I would not recommend that people do that sort of thing. And when they're watching trainers on the internet, there's all kinds of good trainers, there's all kinds of not so good trainers, there's trainers that really know their stuff, they really understand the animals, and they care about the animals, and they care about you. There are also trainers, just like in every profession, that are just out to make some money, and if this horse doesn't work, they've got one waiting for you.
And I suppose the other thing is, it's not like one size fits all. They have to know that they could have 3 horses, and they might do something with one horse that isn't going to work because the horses are different. They all have different personalities.
Yeah, I remember, this is a really interesting story, but there was a little Mustang after my first horse, Blue, died, and I had to get another horse. It took me 3 months to do it. But there was a little Mustang, and somebody had called me and said that they were having problems with the Mustang because the Mustang just wouldn't go. They can go, like you and I, if you run in to the left, one foot is going to lead off before the other one, right? If you run to the right, it's going to be the other foot. If you use the wrong foot, you're going to trip all over yourself. So the horses are the same thing. If they run that way, they have to use their left foot first, right? If you're going to do it that way, it's their right. But we all have a tendency to be one-sided, like human beings do. We're right-handed or left-handed.
Given a choice, you'll go one way or the other.
And so the poor little Mustang couldn't get it together to go the other way. And they worked with him, and they wanted to use him for lessons. And he just couldn't do it. Now, over time, maybe over years, it might have taken a while, and he probably was still trying to understand what was going on, right? Because he was a little Mustang. I don't know how long he'd been in captivity. But say it had even been 2 or 3 years, that's a lot of trauma. You know, now all of a sudden they're putting in a riding room, putting a person on top of him, you're asking him to go away and use a leg that he might not have been used to using. Plus, he could have been injured.
And I was going to say, the first thing that came to mind for me is might not have had good vision out of that side.
Absolutely.
Because where they're a prey animal, they're not going to go where they can't see.
Yeah,
so you never really know, I suppose.
No, but you have to keep trying and say, I talked to the girl and I said, you know, you are so lucky you have a little Mustang there, because there's so much that you could teach people about this little Mustang. You could just teach them how to socialize him, take him for a walk. You know, I keep saying take him for a walk because that simple thing can do so much. Develop that relationship, start to get a little bond, and you'll be amazed how much easier it'll be to work with them. But you can't say, you know, in a week. This isn't a schedule. It's like with kids, you know, they're going to learn at their own rate. With human beings too, I mean, sometimes it takes us a little bit longer and everybody learns differently. And horses, it's the very same way. But I thought she really had a jewel of a horse there that she could teach a lot of things to especially kids and to people. It could be a little mascot of the barn. And I don't know what happened, but hopefully she took that into consideration. Maybe she did work with the little Mustang. So anyway, now I put the little hat on Susie's head, and my horses, I don't have a picture of them, but they wear little party hats. But it took some time to get them to that position, to that point, and I don't just leave them on. I take them off, put them on, take a few pictures, get them off. But the point is that they're not afraid, because it's taken some time to do this. Now, if you have a boarding facility or you have your horses and decide you're going to throw a party, and the horses have never been around hats, around people, around, any of all this stimulation, all these things that you have for parties, like Halloween is a really good one. Sometimes barns will have all these Halloween decorations, and the decorations are really scary. They're frightening, they've got things hanging down, and they'll expect the horses not to be afraid, and you look in the barn, and some of the horses are okay, but some of them are just as far away as they can, not understanding what's happening. And of course you have the wind blowing, and the kids come in and they're dressed in costumes. That's not the way to do it either. You have to introduce horses to things gently, and you have to do it slowly. And then everybody will have more fun. And when you do have your parties like we do, the horses can be a part of it, and then they enjoy it just as much as you do. So
now, in talking about this, is probably really a dumb question, but to me it's kind of like important in a sense. When you work with a horse, say you're even somebody that volunteers and goes down and becomes pretty close to a horse, will they actually come up to you when they see you?
Yeah.
In other words, I know it is kind of a dumb question, but the reason why I ask that is because I'm thinking about dogs. When you have that a bond with a dog, for instance, or even a cat, a lot of cats, there's that, they may not want to come sit on your lap, thank God, but they do recognize you as somebody that they can go up, so they want to be maybe with.
Yeah, well, they recognize you, but they're more subtle than dogs are.
Right.
And their whole persona is much more subtle, and being a prey animal has something to do with that too. But every once in a while, when my horses see me, they will take a little canter. They won't gallop to come and see me, but because it's like we were talking about before, preservation of energy. Horses still have that survival instinct. They don't want to use any more energy to go and go around in the ring over and over again for a lesson any more than they have to. They're not being lazy, and that's a lot of times what people coin them. They're being lazy, or they just aren't behaving, or they're not cooperating. But either they're a lot of times injured, maybe they're old, maybe they're not feeling well, we can't tell. There's so many variables there. But if I have a treat, and I say I have a treat, sometimes they'll gallop and come and see me. So if I have something that they really want, I guess they don't want me as much as they want that treat, but that's okay.
Usually a carrot or an apple, do they like?
Oh, I just say treat. I have little cookies and different things. They like orange slices.
Oh yeah, you told me that.
Yeah.
I never would have thought that. But
yeah, well, I never would have either. When I got them home, we started experimenting and doing different things, and so they like oranges. But yeah, when there's a little bit of a treat, and sometimes they won't gallop. Sometimes they'll just do a little trot. So sometimes they'll be faster than others. There was a barn that I was in, and this poor girl, whenever she would go to get her horse would always turn away and go hide behind a tree. The poor little horse thought that the tree was actually hiding him from her, and it was sort of a joke at the barn. There she is, and there's a horse, he's going the other direction. And she was a really, really nice girl, and he was a really nice horse. And the only thing that I could get out of that is, maybe he just didn't want to go in the trailer. Maybe he had a bad experience in the trailer. Maybe he was ridden a little bit harder. Maybe he wasn't feeling well. There's a lot of reasons you've got to investigate and figure it out. Because if they don't want to do something, they'll let you know. And it's not always about making sure and forcing them to do something they don't want to do. Maybe it's okay not to do it today. Maybe we'll try again tomorrow.
Right.
But say it's the case of even a ride. Say you put this big beach ride together, and there's 10 people and 3 trailers, and you've got one of the trailers, and you're taking 4 other people, and you got to go, and you're on a time schedule. What do? Do you say, well, you know, maybe I shouldn't go, somebody else drive my trailer. You're in a predicament, but
Yeah.
if you have a horse, you have to understand that that may be what you have to do. If you are ready to go to a show and your horse isn't feeling well, or he just really doesn't feel up to it, or he's injured, you've got to make some changes in the best interest of the horse. And so that's the first thing that you think about if you really care for your horse.
And we, you know, as I mentioned before, I used to do a lot of wildlife documentaries, and we used to say that actually about wild animals. There are sometimes some cases where it might be an animal, a bear, or even a particular moose that you're used to working with, that you've been around before, and you kind of know their personality somewhat. We used to always say that even they can have a bad day too.
Oh, yeah.
And so they could be one way a whole length of time before, and all of a sudden, whoops. So you have to, I guess, respect that too, that they can have a bad day, and they're entitled to it, I guess.
Yeah, but even as subtle as some types of colics are, they might be having a bit of a stomach ache, and you may not even know it, because they don't convey those things to us like a dog does.
Especially if you don't check that hourly poop or...
Yeah, or even then, you know, sometimes it's so subtle that, you know, but your sign is when the horse is being a little bit uncooperative. If your horse is usually cooperative and all of a sudden the horse doesn't want to do what you want the horse to do, you might want to think about why.
Like a whiny kid, you know, all of a sudden
There's
the
a
kid's
reason.
kind of acting a little...
Yeah, and it's out of frustration. You know, kids whine, they can't talk, babies anyway.
Right.
There's all kinds of signs, all kinds of noises. Horses make some noises too, but their disposition is just different when they don't want to do anything. You have to be sensitive to that. So anyway, so what you said in the beginning, what is a horse? So one person said that the horse was a beast of burden, that's what he thought of. I've had people come up and say, oh, they're just beautiful, or what else? What do you think of when you hear the word horse?
Terrible, but...
Terrible?
Wild West. You know,
Wild West, that's right, yeah.
Which is kind of crazy in
yeah,
the sense
or the Lone Ranger in that
well,
movie, right? Galloping over a train.
Yeah, I mean, I'm at least...
if you're a kid.
Even I was smart enough to realize that was impossible.
Yeah.
But
you see the image that they're giving kids.
Oh, yeah. But much better today than it was,
yeah,
you know,
that's true.
40 years ago,
much
50
more
years
responsible.
ago.
Yeah.
We used to sit and watch these foolish things.
Well, it's
now,
entertainment, right?
I looked at one not too long. I think I mentioned that to you, that I looked at a show. It was one of the, I can't remember which one it was, but it was one of the old Western movies that we used to watch on Saturday morning, the reruns and stuff. And my God, I mean, some of the things that were happening with these horses, and they were pulling them to make them like they got shot with an arrow and go down. I was like, it was kind of incredible.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have thought twice about that as a kid. Part of it because I was a kid, but also that times have changed. I think people are more sensitive. Yeah, is that the word, sensitive?
Yeah, I think so. And the public at large seems to be more sensitive to animals in general, so that's a good thing, and more, you know, empathetic and all the things we were talking about. So when I think of horses, or when I used to think of horses, I know a whole lot more now, but they run fast, right? And they race, they're pretty, they're big, and they're a little scary, maybe because they're so big, and that was before I knew they were prey animals or how gentle they were. So I was talking to a friend of mine, and he said, I said, well, this is what we're going to do the show about, and he said, they're dangerous. I said, I can't say that. That can't be the very first description of a horse that I have. And he is a very well-respected trainer, instructor, horseman that has been around horses since he was probably 2. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for him. We were kind of laughing about it a little bit, but that's what he said. And I said, well, you know, I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say, I think they're gentle giants, and I think they really are. And I said, in certain situations, they may be dangerous, but if you don't learn what you need to learn, certainly they can step on your foot. Certainly you can fall off, but if you fall off, that means you chose to ride. There are a whole lot of things that can make an animal dangerous. Can't a dog be dangerous in certain situations? A dog that's perfectly docile, maybe in the wrong situation.
A lamp.
Yeah,
anything could be, even an inanimate object.
Yeah, yeah.
So I guess you have to. Well, you already said it. You have to learn.
Right, you have to learn. What he said is partly true. They're dangerous. Why? because they're so big, right? So if they were half the size or the size of a dog, they wouldn't be as dangerous because, well, first you wouldn't be riding them, right? So I think a lot of this danger comes about because we choose to do some of the things that we do with them. You know, we're going to ride around cones or go on a hunt or a hunter pace. And by the way, they don't use actual foxes here to hunt. They use the sun. But still, I mean, if you're going to go in those, quote, dangerous types of events, then you're taking your life in your hands and your horse's life too. Go over a jump and break its leg.
Well, I think of polo as being
polo is very dangerous too. I mean, you see, and it's very responsible of them to change the horses so often because they run at such speeds and they make such small movements, circular movements. It's very hard on the horse's body, but you know, yeah, it's fun for people, but maybe not as much fun for the animals. They're probably happy to get a break after that. So I think they're gentle giants, and sometimes they can be dangerous. But one thing I wanted to say is horses are mammals, right? So we'll get into a little of this categorization of horses. They're mammals because they're warm-blooded, they breathe air, and they give birth to live young. So there's a lot of humans are in that category actually too. The genus is Equus, so you hear of equine, Equus this, Equus that. Horses are prey. They have the eyes on the side, right, and that is so that they can see their predators. They have a blind spot in front.
Well, that's what I was going to say. When you were talking about the basket, is you probably don't ever want to just shove something in front of them in their face, because then they would definitely get startled when all of a sudden they turn and there's something there.
Right, right. But what do you see people doing sometimes when they're horses? The horse is like this high and you're down here and you have the person, the first thing they do, they reach up.
Right in the middle of
right
their
in the middle,
eyes,
yeah.
right where they can't
and what
see.
do the horse do? Sometimes the horse is okay, sometimes the horse will startle. And then the person will startle. So then we have this effect going on, and all of a sudden the person's scared, and the horse scared the person. Or what if the horse, you know, really does do something, jump up a little bit? The person, you know, that's the impression that that person got of that horse. So you have to teach people that that's not what you do. And the other thing that people don't do, they should do more, is talk to the horse, because you can say anything you want, just like you talk to your dog, because they hear your voice, they understand your voice, and they'll remember your voice. So they have a blind spot here. They also have a blind spot behind. You know, we can't see behind either, so they can't see back there, but you can see almost 360 degrees, almost, not quite. They also can't look up. So if you noticed, or I don't know if you have, but if there's something above them, they can hear it, but you never see a horse. You ever seen a horse looking up? It's partly because of the way their neck is. Their neck is meant to go down. So they can graze, but they're not animals that look up.
And they're not, obviously, I mean, if you look through evolution, they don't have pterodactyls flying to grab them.
That's right.
So they're not worried as much from the sky.
Right, right, right. So they also have very large nostrils, and that's so they can smell everything. And then their ears rotate, and a lot of people don't know this. They rotate independently. So one ear could be turning this way, and then the other one... Or they both, sometimes they plant their ears right back here, and just like dogs, or sometimes with people, when people get upset or mad, don't you see their ears get really red, and sometimes their ears get plastered back, and sometimes that's what happens with the horses too. Those are the expressions. And so do you think you can see the expressions when you're sitting on a horse's back? No, because you're sitting back there. So how do you know what the heck's going on? You feel it. You feel the horse jumping up and down. You feel the horse moving its head, but you can't see his face to see what's going on, where he's looking. And they have this thing that Fritz does really well. When he gets upset, he gets annoyed a lot. He flaps his lower lip. So when his lower lip is flapping around like this, that means he's not happy.
And I've never noticed that. And you know, something else just came to mind when we were talking about not being able to look up. Is that why sometimes people have to be very careful with horses, like if they're riding in the woods, because the horse may not necessarily look up and see that branch that's going to clobber you?
Right.
They are not, I mean, they're only interested if they know if they can see anything here. They
Right, well, they know they won't miss it.
Yeah.
But you know, you're up there. I mean, they have no way of measuring
how
tall you are. Well, it happened to me one time. I was with a friend, and this is before when I almost quit because I was so scared. And she was just an incredible horse person herself, really, really great person. But she got me on one of her horses, and I didn't know how to ride. She was just trying to do something nice for me, and they had a little circle with trees in the middle, and there was this branch that was kind of low, and I just wanted to walk. I was happy with that, but the horse probably squeezed or did something that I shouldn't have done. The horse all of a sudden starts cantering in a very tight circle, and I almost hit that branch. I almost went flying off. I don't know what it took me to, you know, to lean down, and of course when you lean down, that's their signal to go faster, right? And so
yeah, that could be
it takes, you can be in big trouble. Well, I mean, realistically, I could have fallen off right then and there. I could have, you know, probably not been decapitated, but I could have been hurt. And then, you know, does the horse get in trouble with her? Probably not, you know, but these are all things that can really be avoided. So back to what horses are. They're prey, they're grazers. We talked about they're herbivores, they're true vegetarians, and along with being grazers, they have to move. So that's how they've been for millions of years. They've had to move and graze and eat. So they eat small meals regularly. They're fight or flight. They need leadership, like we talked about. And they're gentle, calm, and quiet. And they're social. They're herd animals, and they bond with people. And they're very intelligent. And this is all for survival.
You've almost described me there.
Well, no, we're all kind of the same way, and to a certain degree. So I brought this chart. I have this education area at home.
And I hate to say, we're just about out of time.
Oh, really? Oh, no.
We've been going on and on and
do
on.
We have 5 minutes?
I think we probably do.
Okay, so in 5 minutes, we'll do the evolution of the horse. Okay. Horse has been around for about 60 million years. The Earth has been around for about 5 billion. Bacteria has been around for about 4 billion, and then we have millions. 230 million years ago, mammals. Then 65, we had that big asteroid that hit and destroyed everything. 55 million years ago, we had the first horse called Eohippus, the dawn horse, and that was the dawn of life. And so this little guy came out, and I don't know if they can put the camera on him, but he was the size of a dog, about between 10 and 20 inches high. And he was the first one. His predecessor had 5 toes. Now this little guy has 4. And between 55 million years ago and 27 million years ago, the little guy grew up, went from the forest to the Great Plains, and then was surrounded by predators, had to be tall, have long legs, and had to run, so he developed this big neck, and now he has 1 toe. So he went from 5 toes, which is really interesting, I think, to 1. 10,000 years ago, we have the Ice Age. After the Ice Age, the land bridges sunk, and so there was no more ability of populations to move from the Americas into Europe and Asia and Africa. And so that ended the traveling of animals, mammals, humans, and horses. The horse that they call the real wild horse is called the Przewalski horse, that a lot of people don't know about. There's only about 300 in captivity, but the Przewalski horse has never been domesticated. So when Cortez brought the horses over around 1519, I think, he brought the horses over to the Americas. Those are the ancestors to the wild Mustangs. So we have the Przewalski horse. I don't have a picture of him, but he looks a lot like horses did back in evolution compared to the wild Mustangs, which look a lot like the quarter horses and the thoroughbreds that we have now because they were domesticated. Okay. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, we really have to, maybe on the next show, maybe
we'll bring it out
talk
again.
About that again, because I find that, because I had some other questions like, and don't answer this if you know, but zebras, I mean, all these other animals, where's the, mules, donkeys?
Where they fall in,
What's the story on that? Maybe we can touch on that next
We can.
time.
I'll bring this chart and we'll go over it a little bit more. And I like to talk about Ginger Catherine's and all the work she does with the Cloud Foundation, too.
Awesome.
All right.
Hey, thanks again.
Thanks for the time. I appreciate it.
And thanks for watching. And, geez, I seem to be learning something in spite of my issues. Anyway, it just goes to show you that really there's a lot to learn with many things, many pets and stuff that you have. Obviously, as we've talked about, larger animals, larger problems, I guess. But, I'm even starting to see that, gee, if I wanted a horse, there is a way to do it. It is possible, but there's a lot of, preparation work that would save me a lot of grief in the animal, which is actually more important. But again, thanks for watching, and you got to tune in next time. And I'm interested to find out about all these other little offshoots of horses and how they're all related and that whole thing. But thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.